world champion athlete, 2-time world champion, however, actually a 5-time.
If you add my juniors.
If you add your juniors, 5-time world champion, 4-time Commonwealth Games winner, competed in the bobsleigh.
Yeah, very cool.
Very cool.
Very cool, yep.
Which made you the first female athlete to compete in both the Summer and Winter Olympics, which is an amazing feat in itself. One of only 10 athletes to win world championships at the youth, junior and senior level of an athletic event, which...
With Usain Bolt, I might say.
With Usain Bolt is one of the other 10. There's some serious names in there.
He's a lot better than me, but, still.
You've gone on to become a successful doctor. You're the ambassador for the Australian Cervical Cancer Foundation, and probably your greatest achievement and what needs the most recognition is you're a mother of 6 and having a household of 4 children myself. Being a mother of 6 is certainly your greatest,
my
greatest accolade.
Yeah, absolutely.
Welcome to the Hidden Philanthropist, Jana Pittman.
Thank you very much for having me.
So I guess with all that and your life, literally, there is so many chapters in the book of the life of Dr. Jana Pittman. So I just want to explore as much as I can today with you and find out a bit about you as the person, because you've had so much success, and a lot of people, I guess you being my generation, we grew up with you. You're a household name. So many people know about your achievements, but I guess to learn what makes you tick would be super cool. Let's start at the start. What was childhood Jana Pittman?
Yeah, I mean, I have had a really eclectic life and career, and I think a lot of it's played out in the media. So I know there are certainly lots of chapters, drama, Jana, and all that sort of stuff that we can chat about. But my childhood was normal. I grew up in a pretty suburban area with 2 wonderful parents. One was a little bit like me, a hardcore worker, with a big ticker, who pretty much worked Christmas Day, New Year's Eve, everything to provide for our family. So he really instilled that work ethic and that hard work pays off. Brian, that's right. Yep, my dad. And my mum was the most loving, still is the most loving person in my life. She remains the spine that allows me to be who I am, because she's a real advocate for me, but she's also very brutal in her feedback when you need to hear it. She's my babysitter. She's my confidant. She's the woman that sort of taught me a lot about motherhood and an awful lot about resilience. And
when you look back in a lot of the footage of you throughout your athletic career, there's so much footage of your mum there.
Yeah, and she's always in it, isn't she?
You know what? I was going to say, obviously your mum and dad play equally as an important role, but your mum must have been a real mentor to you through the sporting part of your childhood, from what it looks like.
100%. And it's funny that you say that, because it actually has only been recently that I realised how much she was there. Because even in my book that I've obviously just written enough, I often talk about my dad's impact on me in terms of his inspiration and being the one there that was there to watch me race. But mum often reminds me, he was only there for the big races and on small occasions. She's the one who was my taxi driver, who legit picked me up from school at 3:30 in the afternoon and would drive me an hour to Narrabeen to train with Jackie Burns and Melinda Gainsford-Taylor. And then drive me all the way back at 9 o'clock at night. Every day.
So when dad tries to take a bit of cred for being there, mum jumps in and reminds you.
Yeah, exactly. But she made it possible, because I look, as a parent now of 6 kids, I look about how hard it is to get kids just to the local footy game or to gymnastics training, whereas my mum, the sacrifices that woman made for me as a young person is rarely done these days, with our busy lives and hectic schedules. So there's a lot to be said with the amount of effort she put in.
Yeah. And having finished and we'll go through your athletic career, but just going back to you as a child, having been an athlete and now being a doctor, were you an academic at school?
Yes,
or were you an athlete?
Always a nerd.
You were always
a nerd, yeah.
Okay,
so look, there's a few things to unpack there. The first thing being that and most people listening to this will know I'm a quirky person. I've never been a normal, fit-the-box kind of woman, and I was like that as a young person too. Very sort of awkward in my social interactions with others, struggled to really make those friendships last long. I'd meet someone and then, I don't know, say something silly or whatnot, and often find myself alone on the playground, and found a lot of solace in the library. Yep. So it was a bit of both. There was that love of reading, that real love of knowledge, but there was also that security in not having to get afraid of trying to find someone to hang out with at the lunchtime.
Yeah. And at school, when did it become evident to you? I'm going to chop and change for 1 second, because you just hit one of the topics I want to talk about later, and that's that and I wasn't going to call it this, but you called it this awkwardness and a bit out of the box and Do you think it was that later in your career? Like, you always had a heart of gold.
I've tried, but
Well, you did, like, I mean, you're such a beautiful person, but was there times throughout your career where you meant to do, or you meant to portray something differently, or do it differently, but because you're a bit quirky and a bit out of the box,
didn't come out the way I wanted it to.
Came back to bite you on the bum.
Like the crutches incident. Oh my God,
we're going to talk about the crutches incident. But yeah, no, you just said that. I'm like, I remember listening to you talking about something, and you're just like, you know what, if I could have my time again, I wouldn't do it like that. But I never meant it.
That in the way that it came across.
In the way that it came across.
It was always, I've also, again, comes back to my parents and my upbringing, always seen the positive in life. I very rarely would see that there could be a negative connotation put on something. So I don't do the whole calculations when I say something in the media, or I talk about something that I think is important, which can often be a bit taboo or quirky or unusual. Yeah. I don't think, that could be taken out of context, Jana. You could maybe see it in a different way. But I mean, in saying that, the last 5 or 6 years, though, I have really owned my realness. So I talk about incontinence, as you know, and I talk about vaginas and cervical cancer and all these miscarriage and divorce and all that stuff very openly. And I think the fact that I did that as a young person, where people went, oh, a little bit, has almost given me license to do it a little bit more now. And I think that's my greatest role, to be honest, for the future, is to open up conversations about things that other people find really difficult.
Yeah, and touching on that, I try not to do too much research about people before I interview them, because I like to learn the journey and not just ask questions about stuff I already know. But like I said, I've always had an interest in you as an athlete and as a person, and it was me that wanted you on the podcast, so that speaks for itself.
Thank you.
So you're an academic.
Yes, always.
At what point? I mean, you were a very successful athlete at a very young age. When did you go from being an academic to an athlete?
Well, I mean, I was always, even kindergarten, primary school, year 1, year 2, year 3, I did no running, because you don't at school unless you're doing little A's, and I didn't start little athletics till I was 9, so under 9s, under 10s. So I can legitimately remember being 5 or 6 and carrying a little fake doctor's bag around and administering medications to my brother and trying to squash up snails and feed him medicines and things. That's what I wanted to do. Your
mum actually has been quoted as saying in the past that it was evident from a very young age that you were wanted to be, or were going to be a doctor.
I was going to be a doctor, exactly. I was always going to be a doctor. That's what I wanted in life, was to be that or a vet.
Your teddies were your patients.
My teddies were my patients, exactly.
How cool is that?
Yeah, so that's, and then sport came into it again because of my quirky personality. I fit in somewhere. So I went to the racetrack, and I was just great. I can't say, there's no humble way around saying that you win races by 20, 30 metres. I was a standout when it came to my sport. And so I felt like I had a real place in that environment where you just ran hard, you competed, you tried hard, and the results sort of spoke for themselves. So I fell into sport. It wasn't my first choice, but, all of us like the accolades. We all feel good when our, get handed a gold medal. Yep. So it sort of became my career. And right through my teenagehood as well. So I tried to really balance my academia with my my sport and my training. And two things there. I think one really important thing is I'm a strong advocate for young adolescents to continue both sport and their studies. So the amount of kids we see dropping out of sport in year 11 and 12 to focus on their studies, and I can promise parents who are listening, you will lose their academic qualities as well, because they need the endorphins and the adrenaline and the time out from studying, to put into their sport, and it'll pay dividends if you let them keep going. And my results spoke for themselves. I did my HSC at the same time as the Olympics. So it was a very good environment, and I really want other kids to do the same. Yeah.
So it must have happened relatively quickly, this transition from academic to athlete. And the reason I say that, you're on the world stage at 15.
Yeah, that's
and
true.
At the Olympics as a 17-year-old, a lot of work goes into getting to that level. Did it all happen pretty quickly, did it?
For me, it did.
Yeah.
From a sports perspective, yes. So sort of toddling along through your early, 11, 12, 13, 14. And then I don't know what happened. I guess puberty, let's be honest. And I went from running kid-level athletics to qualifying for the Sydney Olympic Games. And I remember, because I'd actually applied to be a basket holder at the Olympics. It's where you can kind of walk behind the athletes and carry their clothes. And I was so excited when they gave me a letter in the mail to say I was going to be one of the official carriers.
So
and all of a sudden I was in the Olympics.
You went from being a basket carrier
to an athlete.
How amazing is that?
Yeah, and in your hometown too. So
that was
quite surreal.
That was Sydney Olympics. Yeah, okay. And before that, though, you'd had success
as a junior.
Well, you're in the Olympics, of course, but you had a world title by then, so you'd been on the podium. You knew what success
felt like,
tasted like. Did that ignite a fire in you?
100%.
Yeah,
I loved winning. I loved pushing myself. I also chose the hardest event there is, which is the 400-meter hurdles. It's like the 200-meter butterfly if you're a swimmer. But I loved it.
Do you know what? One of my questions for you, and it was something that Bruce McAvaney actually said about you in the past, about being fearless and just having, that proper gut determination to do something. 400-metre hurdles. It's like the marathon for sprinters, isn't it?
It's horrible, yes.
Like it's the hard. Why the 400-metre hurdles?
Because of how hard it was. That is innate in me. So you often do that whole conversation around, is success and drive and passion innate, or can you grow it? My attitude towards, you got that as a question on there?
Comment, innate determination.
My determination is innate. It's definitely something
100%.
that's just I've been born with, so I'm very lucky to have that. But I often take the hard road, but I don't see that as a negative. Like, a lot of people say, oh, you're always doing the hard. You did medicine, and like, why couldn't you just go and do midwifery? Like, you love birthing babies. Why do you have to be a doctor? You could be just as effective as a midwife.
Yeah.
Why take the hard road? Why have 6 children? Why have babies by yourself? Which I'm sure we'll talk about. But I've always enjoyed that. I enjoy being uncomfortable, and then the gentleness and the appreciation for self afterwards when you achieve those difficult things is where my peace lies. So I'm always chasing that peace.
Yeah.
And I don't seem to get it unless it's something that's really hard to do.
So moving on from the childhood to, I guess we've touched on it as a 17-year-old, you're in the Olympics. So you've made it. Well, when I say you've made it.
Sort of, yeah.
Sort of. Because we know that further into your career, 4 Commonwealth Games, which we're going to talk about, 5 world titles, but you said you'd give it all up for an Olympic gold medal. So when I say, like, you're at the Olympics, you've made it. You're at the Olympics at this point.
Yes.
But you're still chasing the dream.
Yeah, I mean, most athletes would kill. That's what you want. On your resume, you want to say Olympic athlete, and it's huge. And I'm sure we'll talk about the positives and negatives out of being an Olympian. But yes, at that age, I just wanted to be there. It was just fun to be part of that experience. But as my career progressed, it became gold, and nothing but would calm that storm.
So what happened after the Sydney Olympics? Did you have a sense of fulfillment, or did you have a sense of...
sure.
Or was there a craving for more? Because you're very hard on yourself. Like throughout your career,
for everything.
You've been your own greatest critic.
I have.
What was your feeling after the Sydney Olympics?
It was only a couple of months before the World Junior Championships, which at a junior level is the highest for track and field. So to be honest, I just switched off and focused on the next big championships, which was over in Chile. And I was also running the 4 and the 400 hurdles at the same event, which is, again, very unusual in track and field. So normally we pick one event. We're not swimmers, again. Can't win multiple medals across different events.
Yeah.
I don't think I even focused on it very much, which is a problem. It's something I would have liked to have worked on better as a younger person, is living in the moment a little bit more and actually realising and celebrating those victories.
Yeah.
Because I feel like a lot of my track and field career is distant memories that I don't even feel I can touch anymore.
Yeah.
And that's a little bit sad when you look at it like that you kind of...
Because you were so hard on yourself and such a critic of your own, what you probably at the time deemed as successes or failures.
Yeah.
Maybe you're right. Like, maybe you should have actually looked at what you had achieved and enjoyed it, but you probably didn't. You were probably looking at it.
No, it's too focused and negative and ruminating and...
Yeah.
Yeah, which is now one of my greatest messages to people when I do a lot of speaking gigs and things, is really trying to celebrate the victories, because we're so good at being critics. We're so good at being that negative voice, and something goes poorly and you just sit there and you go over and over and over and over and what you could have done differently, lose sleep over it. But that's how success is lost, because if you spend so much time debating what you could have done differently in something you can't change, it's useless. So I did learn that, though, fairly early, that that was a waste of good energy. So after a while, one of the reasons I kept going and failing at the Olympics over and over and over again was the fact that I could move past that disappointment better than most.
So you've gone from the Sydney Olympics, and I guess the next major thing as I learn your journey, I only know limited things, but for me, I guess the next major thing was the 2004 Olympics. And I mean, you'd forged yourself this reputation in Australia as being our golden girl and the great hope, and you were a real chance at those Olympics, weren't you?
Absolutely. I was reigning world champion and Commonwealth. So 2002, I won the Commonwealth Games, my first Commonwealth gold medal, and relay and 4 hurdles. And then the World Championships, my first ever senior world title, so not juniors, but senior. So I hadn't lost races for a long time, let's just say.
Yeah. So you're going in full of confidence.
Yep.
Like this is your poster kid.
Yeah, I was.
This is your race.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
And then in the training leading up to the Olympics, the lateral. Well, you tell the story. So you you're going to win this race.
Yep.
You're not about to race, but you're
2 weeks before
you're ready for it.
That's right. So for in track and field, we have 8 or 9 races before a major championships, which are kind of your get ready races. And it was the final race in the Zurich Golden League right before the Olympic Games in Athens, and I was on fire. Like, we'd literally broken the world record in training that week. So we'd done a training 400 hurdles, and I'd never run that fast in my life. Like, I was scaring myself at the times. It was like, that's not possible, show me again, kind of thing.
Yeah.
But it's funny because you always want more than you can have, and that's, I think, one of the negatives for a lot of athletes is that fine line you walk of too much. And we were in the warm up at the Zurich race literally half an hour before I was hoping to break the world record before the Olympics, and I popped my knee. So we did a drill that really we'd been doing over and over and over again for a decade, but we pushed the hurdles a little bit further apart, just kind of pushed that envelope just that little bit more, which we did not need to do. Like, we just didn't.
Yeah.
We just rocked a boat for no reason, and unfortunately it paid consequences. So I had.
Did you know that there was risk involved with it at the time, or is it just something
really.
Now that you look back on and gone, you know what, we should never have done that?
We should not have done it.
But
exactly.
You didn't think at the time we shouldn't be doing this.
Absolutely not.
Yeah.
No,
so
not
it
at
was
all.
just a routine training day.
That's right. It was a routine training day. We pushed the envelope because we'd been pushing the envelope all week and had been working so well. I'd been running so fast. I think Phil just thought, look, you just got to push them apart. Let's just push it a little bit more. Because it was a drill that would help you get onto your hurdle. So that's where you're running into the hurdle, and to not make those little tiny stuttering steps beforehand, to push off that hurdle really well. Because we were trying to smash that record. So, you're pushing the boundaries. So unfortunately in this case though, my body was depleted, and it hurt.
I'd love to, at the end of the podcast, after we talk about your athletic career and then your further career into being a doctor, I'd like to touch on mental health and all these other things, because you must have experienced the highest of the highs and the lowest of the lows. For me, I would imagine you've just run a world record time. You know this is yours for the taking. So, I mean, this is an extreme high.
Absolutely.
You do your knee. Like, this is life-changing.
Gut-wrenching.
Yeah.
It is, and it's so funny. And I know obviously some of the people you interview, and I work obviously in medicine with true tragedy and true extraordinary, people that are doing extraordinary things in stuff that really matters. And ultimately, this is just sport. We know it's just sport, but when you're a young athlete, it's your everything. It's your every waking moment. It's the extraordinary amount of sacrifice by yourself and by the team around you. And there's nothing that can kind of wipe that away. So it's very, very challenging, combined with an A-type personality, and someone whose dreams are really put to test on a regular basis. Then add in the media and everybody watching you and your demise in that space was about as rough as it gets.
Yeah, and when you say it's just sport, like, again, that's being really hard on yourself. This is not just sport for you at the time.
Not for me, but for the world.
This was your whole world.
Right.
You'd train for it. You'd live for it.
You'd breathe everything. It's your every waking moment.
This is your everything. So for you, at the end of the day, emotions are emotions.
That's
and
right.
whatever drives your highs and whatever drives your lows and whatever creates, ongoing mental health issues from that, or not ongoing mental health issues, but mental health issues derived from these crazy highs and lows.
Yeah, exactly.
And that can be PTSD returning from war. It can be sport.
Yeah.
It can be divorce.
It doesn't matter what it is. It's whatever triggers that person. Yeah.
So the first surgeon you went and saw said you had a 99% chance of 100% not competing.
Correct.
How's that for statistics? A 99% chance
of
100% not competing.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, he was an optimist.
Can you get more of a pessimist than that?
I know, exactly. He was a really well-renowned surgeon too.
Well,
he's one of the best in the world.
Yeah.
So we thought it was over. The MRI obviously said what it was. So it was great to have a young buck surgeon over in London, who's obviously now one of the greatest surgeons that it is after doing my knee, literally put a phone call through to us and say, get on a plane, come over here and we'll give it a crack. So
the blowout for the knee wasn't great for your career, but it was great for his.
Yeah,
okay.
I put a few people into football teams as physios and doctors, unfortunately, with all my injuries.
So you went on to, you actually had surgery.
I did.
Straight away.
Mm-hmm.
They say that after that operation or that type of surgery, you really shouldn't start rehab, or maybe not start rehab, but start serious rehab for 6 weeks.
That's right.
But you thought you were going to run
3 days later
in the Olympics in 2 weeks.
Yeah, exactly. So we started training again 3 days afterwards, and then we ran the Olympic Games.
Did you ever think this is crazy? This is simply not going to happen?
I didn't think I had anything to lose.
We talk about innate determination and drive. For you, it was stop it.
Yeah.
There was
nothing to lose. So we sort of just thought, well, we've got an opportunity here, and there was no negativity in that space ever. So, and my coach Phil King was extraordinary at that. Like, you know, he was someone who always seemed to have the right type of attitude towards difficult situations. So we were actually best when we were at our most challenging times.
Yeah.
But, you know, the actual outcome of it was harder because I don't think we ever gave ourselves time to think about the fact that we would possibly not win. And I think that, I feel like in hindsight, it would have been, and I do this now, I'm not saying I'm a pessimist with the world, but I now take a slightly different approach to challenges, and I actually say I think it's important for someone to look at the worst case scenario, sit with that for a little while, deal with that just a little bit, and then go back to being positive again. But I feel like in that moment, all we did was say, you're going to win gold, you're going to win gold, we're going to win gold, you're going to win gold, so that when I didn't win the gold medal, that was a pretty big cliff to fall
You
off.
shouldn't have been walking.
I know, but
you made the finals.
We made the finals, which was great.
Like that in itself, if nothing ever else happened
now
in
I
your
realise
career,
how great it is. But
that is like one of the greatest things of all time.
It is a miracle medically, and obviously as a doctor now, I can see even just the anaesthetic itself should have stopped, and the ongoing antibiotics that I was taking and the Clexane injections to get on the plane and all that kind of stuff. It was a miracle that we made it to the start line. You just got to try telling that to a 22-year-old kid thought
they were going to win gold. So retrospectively, it was probably one of the greatest things that you've managed to push your body to achieve.
Yep.
Yeah, but instead of that, you went from being Australia's golden girl
to Australia's drama queen.
Well, do you know what? And I guess this is one of the moments where getting to know you and having done a little bit of research on you, knowing that, you know, you're not drama, Jana, but you said at the start, these are not my words, these are yours,
fine,
like you're a bit awkward at times.
Yeah, and I am very.
So you've had this moment where you've absolutely tried to portray one thing, the media's picked it up, and it's gone in the complete opposite direction.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. Tried to show a really strong, resilient, determined person, and I am a marshmallow underneath. Like, I'm a very gentle, very caring, very soft, empathetic person, who is very, very honest as well, which can definitely have advantages, but also can be quite a disadvantage in terms of when people take it out of context.
And it all comes down to perspective as well, because for me to watch it, I just don't get out of it what other people get out of it.
I thought that too, because when I did Australian Story last year, obviously, and I actually hadn't seen, don't laugh, but I actually had not seen that footage of me throwing the crutches ever in my life.
Yeah,
so
right.
in my head, I was like pelting these things 30 metres away and like standing up like Superwoman with this coat hanging off behind me, like I was trying to be this huge star. And I just chucked them down. I'm like, where did all that...
But that was like your sign to the world.
Yeah, that look at
Here
Aussies. Here we that's right. I was just what I was trying to portray was, look at Aussies. We don't get told we can't do things. We just turn around and say, bugger it, we're doing it anyway. That's what I was trying to commit.
Something you said before, you've never watched that footage.
Until then.
Have you watched a lot of your races and a lot of your footage?
No, not really.
So you've got home and Dramiana starts.
Yeah, it was hard.
Well, in the Australian media.
That's right.
Dramiana starts.
Well, it had started throughout. It became a saga. Like, it really was. Like, you look back on it, and it's so interesting, though, because I reckon now it would be quite different, because we love this whole reality TV thing, but that was at a time we didn't really have reality television. So it was, and we also didn't have social media. So there was no ability for anyone to have any direct contact with you, for you to talk about things that you were going through. It was just whatever the media said goes. So people just believe what they read. So it was a very different time. But I remember, like, mum and dad were overseas. My manager was Dave Flaskus, who was Ian Thorpe's manager. And so he was dealing with Thorpe, who had an injury, and nobody looked at what was going on back home. Because I reckon just a simple communication to our team, my coach Phil would have been straight away cut it. He would have stopped it straight away. Like, as in, he would have said, no more media, done, out, finished. But we had no idea. We had no idea what was going back home.
And again, I mention that word retrospectively again, but looking back on it now and seeing what really happened, like, what a crazy reaction from the Australian public to see this young girl who's trained her whole life, has gone and had surgery, should never have been in there, made the finals, doesn't win, and you're crying.
And it's negative. I don't know.
Get criticised for crying. Like, this is just the craziest thing of all time.
Yeah, I'd never thought of it like that, to be honest.
Like, here you are sharing your emotions with the world. Yeah. Everyone's happy to support you and cheer you and encourage you for your success. But when you have a moment of heartbreak, it's almost like...
Yeah, do you know, I'd never actually...
You're a disappointment.
Never thought about that before. Sad, isn't it? It's actually really sad when you think of it like that.
Yeah, I'm not down with it.
Yeah, no, I don't like it either.
And then you got back to Australia, and it all hit home. And so
It did.
That
That
back
was
home
very
for Australia,
real.
back home here, Drama Yarn had started, but not for you. You didn't really until you got home.
I didn't recognise it till I stepped off the Qantas plane, the Indigenous Qantas plane that you get off.
Yeah.
That's the first time I realised what had happened.
Yeah. How did that feel?
First time. That was legitimately heartbreaking. And the ticker tape parade, which is where you walk through the centre of the city with all the other athletes, that was one of the hardest experiences in my entire life. Like I can tell you, I still have a little bit of nightmares about it. It was that painful. Mainly because people were really cruel from the sidelines, yelling out things to you. One guy came up and actually spat in my face and told me I was a disgrace to our country. And I was just like, oh man. Like obviously I'm the typical person that looked at that moment, rang my mum and talked about it as you do and said, look, he must have been having a really bad day. You know, for someone to be that upset with you, he must have so much going on in his life, and hopefully that made him feel better, because that's just the way I always try to look at those situations. But you know, as a young woman, it really shaped and ripped through you can hear my little one crying. Yeah, it really shaped and ripped through my identity of who I thought I was.
And this is someone that absolutely knew nothing about you other than
not at all
what they'd seen in the public eye. So, really,
yeah, really tough.
Really horrible.
Yeah, it was tough. And I mean, like, we always try and throw a positive light on it. Like, I often say to my mum, why did you call me Jana? Because it rhymes with drum. If you had have called me Helen, I might have been Heroic Helen. Or like, it just, why did my name have to rhyme with that?
Repeating myself though, in hindsight, and times have changed, and social acceptance and this whole. But I mean, there's still a degree of tall poppy syndrome in this country.
A lot less though.
Yeah,
do you think?
I don't know.
You don't know? I don't know. I guess I've just had such positive, wonderful media the last 10 years. Like I feel like I'm a completely different person. We still talk about the drama Jana, but I think we almost talk about it as a message to people to say, look, don't always believe what you read, because look, here's Jana who had a horrific media career. Actually turns out she's all right. She's not as bad as we thought she was. And so it kind of gives us a positive to look at it and think, do we sometimes perhaps need to rethink the way we characterise people?
Did it crush your spirit, or did it create more determination and fire in you?
A bit of both. So it definitely gave me that determination, not always in a positive way. I think some of my success became extrinsically driven to override some of that, both for myself and to others. So I think there was definitely a part of me that was like, I feel so crap about myself and feel so low and unworthy that I need to prove that I'm worthy of life, and therefore I will try and win this, and I will try and make this work, and I'll try and go and become a doctor. There was definitely a component of that, just hoping to fit in and hoping to fill that space of pain. But there was also, I think, the flip side of it, that I genuinely felt angry by that situation, and I thought I'm gonna do this injustice positive. Like, there's got to be a positive out of this.
Try and find an internal positive.
An internal positive, because look, I have beautiful friends who have taken very different avenues with very similar stories with drugs and alcohol, and who have been equally successful, and some of them have been returned veterans who have done extraordinary things for our country, way above and beyond what I've done as an athlete, and they wear that pain so avidly every day, and often through the bottle, and need that support. So I feel like in some ways it's a positive. Like, it's given me such resilience, like such strength now as a 40-year-old woman.
Yeah.
But yes, at the time, it was hard.
And at times I've heard you, because I believe one of our greatest strengths is recognising our weaknesses. And you've openly admitted that it really did knock you around.
Oh, absolutely.
You talk about like the bottle and drugs and all that. Like, I'm not going to go there with you and even ask you if that. But did it lead to mental health
eating issues? So I definitely have never. I've been very lucky. I've never had any problems with alcohol and drugs, because I know a lot of my friends have, and we speak very openly about that being something everybody has to get help with. But it did come through in an eating disorder for me. Partly it was a lot of athletes, we definitely have that desire to be skinny and we have to look a certain way. And but my eating was not really associated as much to my weight. It was in my early years, but that was a restrictive eating program that actually helped my sport. So there wasn't a negative there. But at some point in my mid-20s, that eating became comfort eating, because I was hurting and I was sad. And so there might have been some negative thing that happened in the media or whatnot, and I would go and eat 2-3 blocks of chocolate, which is just not effective. And then finding terrible coping mechanisms to kind of get through that. So, you know what? That's just the same as having a bottle of beer. Like, really, it's a stress situation.
It's
a vice. Thank you. It's the perfect word. It's a vice.
That's what you turn to be able to cope with your internal demons.
Yeah, and that can be really ineffective, especially when you're supposed to be a certain body weight and race. It's not really great if your food becomes your comfort mechanism. But so yeah, there was definitely signs of cracking, 100%. I noticed them, but I flat out refused to give in to them.
So you didn't go and seek any support?
I tried once or twice
Yeah.
for the eating issues, because I recognised that they were causing some conflict in my marriage, and definitely some weight issues. Like I was starting to get too fat, just being really honest, for sport. Like there is, I know, whilst you touch your tummy right now, I'm there, Don. I'm 6 kids later. I've got rolls in the bakery these days, but I'm proud of my rolls. They're the ones that grew my babies.
Can I blame 4 kids on my fat rolls?
Absolutely. But I'm genuinely talking about my weight was too high to be effective in my sport because I was eating too much. But the point was that I don't know where I was going with that. Actually, I can't remember.
No, I was just saying, dealing with mental health. And did you go and get the support that you needed?
Did I get support? Thank you. Yeah. So I did try a few sort of psychologists, but when you see a sports psychologist, what do you think they want to do? They want to talk about how you perform and how you get the best out of your competition. I was a brilliant performer, as in races for me was my escape. They were my happy place. They were the times that I loved life. I did not need to be coached around how to survive a call room. What I needed to be talked about is how to deal with my own looking in the mirror at myself and being confident with who I was as a person, and social skills would have been fantastic. How to have a conversation with someone, how to know when to shut up rather than talk all the time would have been really effective. Those kind of general life skills, or how to find your people, how to find your village. Like I now have the most extraordinary village of people who love me for all my quirky bits and pieces, and are there 24/7. But it took a long time to find that space.
One look at me, you can tell that I've never been an Olympic athlete.
I don't look like one anymore either.
What I would say, and it's the only thing that I can use to relate to each other. I came out of high school, don't have a university degree, high school dropout, measured success in a different way to other people, and pushed what I deemed successful at a young age is success. A lot of people measure in money, which is like, you just learn that's like success really is what you're like as a husband, what you're like as a 100%. Father. Like these are the things that we should be measuring success by. But
although if you're going by that, my success is pretty bad considering how many times I've been divorced. And
we're going to get to that. But yeah,
no, you're right. Your people skills are your success. And
what pushed me was just, it was like almost being a corporate psycho. Like I thought that I had this thing that I needed to achieve. And when you're on that path, and for you, like you have this determination, you have a drive that very, very few people have. And I reckon with mental health, and I've mentioned before, and I've spoken openly about my mental health issues and anxiety and things like that, is that when you're so driven and you have certain personality traits, recognizing weakness is really, really difficult, because you're always just pushing on and pushing on.
Right, pushing past.
And you're sort of not stopping to say, you know what, there's a whole heap of problems here. And I'm not suggesting for a second that you had all these problems, but
no, I
just mean, but you were so focused, and you were getting smashed in the media, and you had injuries, and you were not reaching what you deemed to
Potential.
Be success.
Yep.
Pretty hard to stop and say, you know what, I might go and see a therapist and get some help or something like that.
Yeah, no, that's a good point.
I could only imagine that you must have pushed through some really serious demons back then.
And it all came crashing down in 2012. So for some context, I lost Athens with a knee injury, I lost Beijing with an Achilles injury, and I lost London with a plantar fascia injury. So 3 Olympic Games in a row where, hands on heart, I should have probably brought a medal home from each one of them. So I should be a 3-time Olympic medalist by now.
What were they?
Athens, first Olympics, my knee injury.
Yep.
Moved forward 4 years. I was again reigning world champion and again Commonwealth champion. So all the accolades in the world go into the Beijing Olympic Games as reigning favourite.
Snapped
my Achilles.
Was that?
2008. Snapped my Achilles. 2012, London Olympic Games. Okay, I hadn't had as much success in the years before then, but I was still a definite chance to come at least get a silver or a bronze.
Is this your foot? Yeah.
My foot. So it was around that sort of time where I'm like, right, this is just injustice. This is just freaking ridiculous, to be honest. How can so many injuries happen? But it was also a time when, unfortunately, my marriage had fallen over, so I was divorced. I was a single mum. My finances, that I'd spent every bicky I had trying to make the Olympic Games again, and just was sitting there thinking, well, what am I going to do?
You'd had success, though. 2006 Melbourne Commonwealth Games.
Heaps of gold medals.
Winner,
heaps of
2007
just not the
World
Olympics.
Champion. 2008, I was going to say,
exactly.
You went to the Olympics. So 2006.
Heaps of success, just not.
First marriage?
First marriage, yes.
To your coach.
My coach.
Chris.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
Yes, and
Was-
that,
One of
that was, I don't know where to go with that.
whether that was one of the successes or one of the failures in these
absolute
years. But you got married.
Absolutely success, and we have a beautiful kid together.
If you take
know.
nothing else out of it, you got married at Morning Star. I mean, it
was a beautiful place. Yes,
So
exactly.
you got to.
Morning Star is great, and I love Mount Martha as well. That was
My mum
one of
got
my
married at Morning Star.
Really?
Yeah. I'm
Yeah,
a
they're
Peninsula
cool.
boy. So.
Yeah, okay, I love it. I would move there in a heartbeat. I still love Mornington Peninsula. But yes, this is the thing, I guess, is through all the negatives and failures, there was so many positives as well, and so many times where it just looks like you're getting on the top of the hill again. And I still believe that genuinely the reason why I have a great resume, and I'm aware of it, is that I was very comfortable with being uncomfortable with failure. So I've always, for some reason, been okay with it.
Yeah.
It's just, I don't know, because I had a lot of it, but it's also just, what other option have you got?
No, I guess
Nothing.
it's that conversation we had at the start about what you deem it to be and what you look back on it. Like there's probably within you, but not now, but back then, so much failure.
Yeah.
Really, from
You just get used
someone
to
out
it.
looking in, though, there was
It's
so
not
much
that
success.
Yeah, exactly.
There was so much success,
That's
like
right.
we've talked about, Commonwealth Games, gold medals, world titles.
That's right.
Huge amount of success.
Yep, huge amounts.
Marriage comes along, motherhood comes along.
Best day ever.
Yeah.
He was a little star.
The baby or the wedding?
Oh, both. But, you know,
Okay. Yeah,
they all kind of happen at the same time.
So you become mama bear.
Yep.
And how does that change your life?
It just gave me more, like for most parents, it gives you a lot of perspective. It does a few things. You flail at it completely, which is also quite challenging because when you're obviously in a sport or you're good at your career, you've got a lot of control, and all of a sudden this little human comes along and just throws that control out the window. So I think it was a real reality check, which was great. Even as a young person, I always wanted a big family. So I was very happy to be starting that pathway early in my career. Yeah, I have achieved that very, very, very well. But yeah, I've always wanted that lots of kids. So my mother had infertility, so therefore I think it was something that I focused on early in my career at a time when athletes didn't often have kids either.
Yeah.
So it was definitely a taboo thing.
You went on to have success basically straight after. Yeah.
That was one of the, when you talk about highlights, that would probably be the most extraordinary thing I think I ever did, was to come back so soon after having a child, and just prove what the human body can do with the right training and the right mindset. Because like, I remember even 3 months before the World Championships, I was running still so slow, but you just got to hang in there. Look, if we make the final, it'd be great. And then overnight, your body just goes, oh, I remember how to do this, and smack you back running really well. And it's phenomenal to watch what the body can do.
Something that, and I'm just talking about it because we're talking about your first marriage, and we've mentioned before about the media bashing and this is just one of my frustrations. This isn't a Jana Pittman thing. This is Andrew Purdie frustration. But it's amazing in the Australian mainstream media, isn't it, that like you have all this success and yes, it's reported on, but then you have your knee blowout and drama Jana, and then you go on to have a marriage that fails and some other things.
That gets more attention than when you got married in the first place.
And I'm going to talk about this because you've openly said, like, you got your boobs done.
Yep.
It's like
twice.
The media picks up on this.
I know.
And makes a bigger deal out of it.
Yep.
Then it's just like, and that was the whole start of the Hidden Philanthropist. I was sitting at home one night and I was watching Lindsay Fox on TV. There was an article about him landing his helicopter on the beach down at Portsea, and I talk about this in so many podcasts. And it's like, the media jumps straight on it and crucify him because he landed his helicopter on the beach. But it's like, and he needs to cop that heat, and he does cop it. But what frustrates me is he can't pick the phone up and ring the paper and say, you know what, I did land a helicopter on the beach, but I also gave $5 million to charity last year, and I did this good, and I did this good, and I did this good, and I did this good. And it's just, it's the old saying that, you know, shit press gets printed in big font on the front page.
I know.
And good press, isn't it? Like, so for you, I would imagine at this point in your career, when you did have, you know, you got married and then it broke down, like it would be starting to become increasingly frustrating.
Oh, it
getting
was
hammered.
I started getting used to it probably by this point. The year beforehand, I started being like, oh, this is tiring. But around the 2006 Commonwealth Games, there was all that Tams and Lewis drama as well.
Yeah.
I got over it.
Was it real?
No, she and I, well, I don't really know, to be honest, because we were actually really good friends, her and I, so really, really good mates, because athletics is a really lonely sport. There's not many people that can test at that high level internationally. So we were regularly rooming together. In fact, in the 2004 Olympics, she was the one who supported me with my injury. So she was in London when I had the operation. She stayed with me post-operatively and helped me with the ice through the night, like was getting up in the night, replacing my ice, and extraordinary person. And so at some point we competed, we run the same event. So she's obviously an 800 runner, I'm a 4 hurdler, but we meet in the middle at the 400 metres. So regularly we would have to compete against each other. Very fun banter rivalry. There was never any, you know, sometimes she won, sometimes I won. It really didn't matter. But for some reason, there was just this weird circus around this particular incident, doing a TV interview where she commented on something, and the media took it out of context, got a comment from me. She'd never even said it. I'd never even said it, and they just blew it out of proportion.
Yeah.
And that was it. And we almost lost our friendship over it.
I was about to say, even though it didn't happen, between you, did it actually happen due to...
Yeah, we lost our friendship for a few months.
Fake media report, yeah.
Correct. And the stupidity in that situation was the phones existed, so all it would have taken was me or her to pick up the phone and say, did you say this? No, I didn't. Let's have a hug and a coffee, and it would have been over.
Yeah.
But...
instead, it just created another distraction.
Yeah. So, and I was very determined and very focused then, because I was quite injured at that point, and I was trying really hard to win a Commonwealth Games in your home country, get that kind of Kathy Freeman experience in front of a home crowd.
Yeah.
So, if of all the times in my career, that was probably where I was so focused. Like, I didn't do myself any favors then, because I was completely and utterly one-track minded.
Yeah.
Which wasn't great, because it was a hard block of time.
That one-track mind though, and dogged determination. It's probably also what led to a lot of your successes.
Absolutely. But I've watched Usain Bolt go and do it after he eats a bucket of fried chicken and goes out and parties all night and goes and wins the Olympic Games the next day. And you're just like, well, there's got to be some balance. I am clearly not doing it entirely the right way.
Did you try that technique though?
No, I wish I had in hindsight.
So while we're on your sporting career, I mean, you've had these wonderful successes in the 400 metre hurdles and in running. You then turned your hand at one point to, I think you had a bit of a go at boxing. And
I tried everything.
You tried everything.
Yeah, well, I think what it was again after the London Olympics, when everything was kind of, his shit was hitting the fan, to be honest.
I don't mean to cut you off, but was the end of the Olympics for you mentally, you're like, I'm done with running?
No, the opposite. So I didn't want to, I got to after London and I was just like, I don't want this to be the end.
How old were you?
I don't know, 2010, so 28-ish. I don't want this to be the end, but I recognised that track and field was beating me up and it just wasn't what's going to happen for a while. So I thought, I also recognised at that point that I had very few memories of my sports career and that was my fault, that I had been so in that space that I hadn't really focused on the positives that had come out of it. So I thought, I'm going to go and find a different sport. I want to go to an Olympic Games and appreciate the privilege it is to be an Australian Olympic athlete. And it's not going to be a sport I'm trying to win. So I want it to be something where I love it and get to experience it. So I tried boxing, rowing, cycling and bobsled.
The Olympics isn't something that you go to just to have fun. Like,
well,
I mean, unless you're an extreme athlete, like the Olympics is the pinnacle of a sport.
I know.
But you wanted to just go and have fun in something.
No, I wanted to go and appreciate the privilege it was to be there.
But you thought that within yourself you were good enough to go and pick up another sport and make it to the Olympics.
Yes,
yeah, that's
actually.
Awesome.
I am,
God
but thank you. That does makes me sound very arrogant. You're right.
No, it's amazing.
No, it's that I'm built to be an athlete. Like I am. You've got to remember that, like you talked about the breast implants and things like that, is I am a born andropod. Like I'm a complete male in a female body. You know, I've got a male pelvis. I'm an 85 kilo woman. I'm 6 foot. Like I'm just a dude in a female form. So I was built for sport. I wasn't built for
good looking dude.
I wish. But you know what I mean? Like I had that,
yeah.
I always had that physical ability in any sport that I did other than tennis or anything with balls, because I can't hit rackets and my hand-eye coordination's horrendous.
Yeah.
But any gross motor sport, if I tried it, I could do it for a little while. So I just wanted to give it a real crack. And I think rowing, I don't think I would have been good enough. I tried. I think cycling I could have done because I started getting quite competitive at cycling.
Yeah.
And boxing, well, I didn't give them enough of a chance because bobsled became real straight away. So, I made.
How did that come about? I mean, with boxing, I would imagine that's sort of integrated into your training though previously, and you've had a taste of that, and everyone's ridden a bike before.
Yeah.
Bobsled.
Adam ears wouldn't like hearing you say that.
No, but you know what I mean. I don't like everyone grows up and goes, "Oh yeah, I've done bobsled. I love it."
Yeah.
How did that come about?
Well, it's funny you say that because I just went bobsledding on the Gold Coast at the Big Banana, and I just like going down there and you're like, I bet you heaps of people sit on this and think that's what it's like. It's absolutely not like that.
No.
It's real and scary and fast and it's very, very, like the adrenaline provoking incident of bobsled is next level. But it happened because my training partner as a teenager was a 400 hurdler, and she actually converted, I don't know how she did it, but she converted to bobsled when she was in her, late teenage years.
Yep.
And she'd been already to Olympic Games. She did not have the big muscly power that she needed at the back. And so she was actually contacting multiple athletes. She never thought she'd get an answer from me, but I was mad keen looking for another sport.
Yeah.
Perfect.
And you had the power.
And I had enormous amounts of it. In fact, bobsled was the perfect sport for me because there was no longer a weight issue. Like I could be the heavy, no matter, there was no restriction on my weight. Whereas in track and field, legitimately, the best weight for a track athlete is around the 60 kilo mark. I was pushing 70, 72 kilos when I had 4% body fat. Like it was, so you can imagine how fragile your body is when you're starving yourself to be an accurate weight.
Yeah.
I remember going and getting my skin folds done, which is where they pinch you everywhere and tell you whether you've got the right weight or not, in bobsled, and them telling me I was too skinny. And like I was just like, hallelujah. Like it was like,
you can go back to smashing those blocks of chocolate and not needing to worry about it.
So that's when my whole eating issues actually disappeared, because all of a sudden I was like hoovering food, hoovering it, just to get big enough, and lifting crazy amounts in the gym. And I love weights. Like my body just ate up the training.
Yeah.
So it was amazing.
Did you go on to think that you'd have success with it? Did you think you'd make the Olympics?
We thought we'd make it, yeah. Because the thing is, it wasn't me, was it? Because my pilot, the girl, so there's a 2-woman bobsled. She's already a dual Olympian, so she was going for her 3rd Olympic Games. So I knew really all I had to do was bring the power.
Yeah.
And we would make it. What we wanted to do was, she usually came in the sort of 15th and 16th. We wanted to be top 10 ideally. We didn't. We ended up coming, I think, actually I don't even remember, 12th, I think. But very soon we realised our sled and our conditions weren't quite up to the other athletes. Like the other athletes had millions of dollars of programming, which we just weren't able to compete with.
Yeah. From an emotional perspective, an internal perspective, did it fulfil what you wanted to achieve
100%.
in regards to going to Olympics, having fun?
Well, it wasn't just the fun, it was the memories. Like I'm telling you, Andrew, I can't remember standing on the start line in Athens. I cannot even remember that. And I have no memories. It's like it never happened to me. But I can vividly remember when they called us to our blocks at the bobsled, and I can remember sliding the bobsled onto the track and popping it in the grooves. I can remember the smell of the sweat of everybody around, because it's all like sweaty and cold and icy. I can remember the cowbells ringing in the stadium. Like I've got all these visual, extraordinary pictures of what it feels like to compete at an Olympic Games.
Isn't that amazing?
That's what I wanted.
Like in both occasions, in both scenarios, you're at the peak of the sports.
Yeah.
But at one of them, you enjoyed it and remembered everything and took it all in. And
it's great.
And
the other one I can't remember.
I can't even remember. I wonder why that is.
I think of the nerves, the adrenaline and the sheer fear, and you're there for the pressure and the anxiety that you're there to do a job. Whereas I was still there to do a job. Don't get me wrong, I was very serious. It was fun, but I was switched on. I was an animal in the bobsled, but it was still... I was just grateful. I think that's the difference. I was just actually really grateful to be there and really proud of the opportunity, and it was just fun. Like it was a great sport. I mean, look at it.
When did you hang the boots up, so to speak, on your sporting career?
Well, not intentionally. So I actually went back to track and field after that and was running so fast. So the bobsled training instilled this massive weapon in me, and I was running like the 100 metres in 11.2, which is crazy fast, like it's Melinda Gainsford fast. Unfortunately, I didn't have sort of a coaching environment at that point, and I was 3rd year in medical school by then. So I was really sort of trying to weigh up, do I or don't I? I really considered doing bobsled again and becoming the pilot, so being the driver. I still have a bit of regret about that. I think I would have loved to have gone and been the pilot. We have a young girl, Bree Walker, who's actually trying to win the Olympic Games in the single monobob, which was a 1-woman bob, but that didn't exist when I was doing it. So I would have... Yeah. That whole, could I win a gold medal? Yeah, this is my head goes, maybe I should have gone and done that. No, don't go there. But it was literally in the middle of medical school. I was training for the Rio Olympic Games, and 2 things happened. The first thing was I was asked to scrub for a cesarean section. The first one that I'd ever been involved in properly, where I was going to be one of the assistants helping, and it wouldn't finish in time to make it to training. And so I'm sitting there going, do I, don't I? And then I realised my heart was in my medicine and not in my sport anymore. And so I rang my coach and said, well, actually, I think he was already there. And I said, I'm really sorry, I'm not coming, which is very naughty of me, but I realised that
at some point there in the switch, and you talk about like the ultimate successes in life and what success looks like from someone else looking in. Like, here's a woman that's a professional athlete, done a medical degree or doing a medical degree, and is a mother, and is dealing with the Australian media still. Like, superhuman effort.
Getting into medicine, though, healed 99% of the wounds of the sports career, though. As you say, heaps of success. I'm aware of that. But some of the heartache that came from it, and you're right, though, it probably isn't the heartache of the Olympics. It was the heartache of the media and the disappointment and the not feeling adequate enough was very much wiped clean when I took the opportunity of going to try to medicine. Because I tried to go into medical school at a time, no one in their right mind at 30 years of age, as a single mum with a kid, it's the same thing, single mum, would go and try to go do a degree that would take 5 years out of your life, and your earning capacity's gone. It was a real it was a real moment, a pivoting or a sliding doors moment in your life where you could go. I could have gone into media, I could have gone into, coaching and all that kind of stuff. But that burning desire to two things again. Firstly, right some of the wrongs that I'd done to myself, so prove to myself I was worthy of a great life. And two, also wipe away some of the little bit of the discomfort, remembering that I'd always wanted to be a doctor. So when my beautiful mother had said to me, if you get into medical school and you become a doctor, that's what you always wanted to be. Yes, sport's been amazing, but if you actually fulfill the dream that you wanted as a kid, that's going to really dampen some of the things you didn't end up achieving in sport. So I look at it now as almost, if I had have won the Olympic Games, I wouldn't be a doctor and I wouldn't give my current career away for the world.
Yeah. So you probably answered a couple of my questions that I was going to ask, and that is, like, obviously you had all these successes, but your one dream was to win gold. So you were left with an empty feeling at the end of your career. How did you fulfill it, or how did you fill that hole? But you've answered it. So you went on with medicine.
That's right. Yeah, absolutely.
So I guess now we've talked about your sporting career. There's some questions that I've got to ask you, and that's obviously the spotlight that the sporting career put on you.
Yep. And
then I guess gave you some further problems to deal with the breakup of your marriage.
Yes.
Kids.
Yep.
Becoming, I guess the word, because I'll get you to tell the story, but an unconventional.
Yes, but I love that now.
Yeah.
There was definitely, you're right, I think you asked earlier, around a time where everything sort of fell apart, and that was definitely around the London Olympic time when my divorce was being finalised. He'd met someone else and was getting married, and I felt very alone. My career was over. I didn't have medicine yet, so I hadn't applied for the degree yet. I'd actually met someone else who was a fantastic guy, really wonderful man. We'd whoopsie-daisy fell pregnant, and unfortunately lost that baby. But it was one of those scenarios where, you come to the, oh my God, I shouldn't be pregnant right now. But then, okay, yes, right, we'll make the most of it. I've always wanted lots of kids, and then that's taken away from you. And so we'd been together for about a year at that point. We fell pregnant a second time, lost another baby. I also had a miscarriage with my first husband as well. So starting to go through that, oh gosh, there's just so much crap being thrown at you the whole time and stuff you just can't, you have no control over your body as a woman. And obviously I work in women's health now and I see miscarriage all the time. But it's just, I remember sitting there thinking there is nothing going right now. Nothing's working, and I was sabotaging that relationship, as you do when things aren't going to plan, and thinking I need to find a change. Something's got to break, or otherwise I'm not going to make it out of this space. And so that's when I thought, let's shove it down and look at it and use that discomfort and that heartache to actually pull yourself out and find a pathway forward, because I just didn't think there was another option otherwise. Yeah,
and what was the pathway? At this point, were you starting to think it wasn't going to happen? I'm talking motherhood. It wasn't going to happen.
Motherhood, yes. I'd gone to see a fertility specialist at that point because I'd had 3 miscarriages. So I'd had one, obviously, child, and then 3 subsequent miscarriages. And they can't find anything. They didn't know. There was just maybe it's a sport. Maybe it's because you're an athlete. Maybe you train too hard. We know that's not the truth now, but that was a time when we didn't know all that information. It wasn't researched as well as it is now. And that was a time when, I didn't have a period for half of my career because I was too skinny. So that was that could have caused it. We know that, again, is not true, but that's a lot of information to give someone, and then the blame sets in and you think, oh, is it my fault? Did I cause these things? But I genuinely believe, yet again, I'm now a woman who works. It is what's pushed and inspired me to become a women's health doctor. I'm applying for the obstetrics and gynecology program right now to work with women every day who go through miscarriage, who go through infertility every day, and I had a cervical cancer scare in 2014 and again last year, and so you have this constant reaffirming. Could take it negatively, or that could be the reason that you actually end up doing what you're supposed to be doing, which is having that true life experience to be able to share with someone who's going through something equally. So I guess all the negative media and all the spotlight and everything has allowed me to have a voice in areas like this, where I feel like my gift is that the quirky, taboo drama Jana now can really openly talk about things which need to be talked about in the press. Yeah. And I don't seem to get anything other than positive feedback from it.
I'm
leveraging my sports career in a positive women's health arena. Yeah. And I would not be able to be that advocate in that space if I hadn't have had the career that I had in sport, and if I hadn't have had all the media attention, which at the time was incredibly painful. It now gives me such a powerful voice. Very rarely will I contact one of the media stations and say, I have a message that I want to talk about, shingles, for example. So I'm a massive advocate. My poor mother had horrendous shingles a few years ago, and I didn't even know really what was going on, and I wished I'd been able to help her through that space. And I thought, that's not going to happen. I'm going to use my voice to talk about it. So I contact multiple stations and I say, we need to talk about this. Yeah, go ahead, Jana, come on, no problem. Yep. So I wouldn't have those doors opened if I hadn't have had the negative media. So I sort of think, well, you have to see it as a silver lining.
Yeah, well, it's given you a reputation that you can leverage off. Correct. And Before I'm going to wrap the podcast up with your advocacy work, but before we go there, I mean, obviously you had these miscarriages, but you're a very nurturing person. I mean, you've got 6 kids.
Yeah, I do. 6.5.
6.5.
Yeah, I donated an egg to my best friend, and they've got a little girl together.
How beautiful.
Yeah.
Okay, so you got 6.5.
Yeah.
Full of surprises today. So 6 kids.
Yeah, 6 of my own.
Motherhood obviously plays an incredibly important part of your life. Was that something that you'd always had a vision of?
Yeah.
You touched on it before that you had, but like 6 kids is...
I always wanted a big family, which is really, I know it's really odd these days because so many people are like, you're happy with 2.5 kids, but I always thought I had 5. Like I literally always thought I'd have 5. And I think certainly the miscarriages definitely pushed me to want more because I think, we'll go for one more. Oh, what's one more? Oh, what's one? Whoops, there's 2 twins. So, it's like, it definitely gave you that, again, appreciation. You're like, oh God, I'm so lucky to have 1. Oh, I'm so lucky to have 2. Oh, so lucky to have 3.
Yeah. And I guess your sporting career and something that I guess in someone else that hadn't had such a extreme life as you, like you talk about overcoming adversity and things like that, just little things for you, like you failed your first initial entrance exam to get into medical school.
Of course. It couldn't be an easy pathway.
For someone else, that'd be... But for you, I mean, that is probably nothing even worth talking about because you're always going to go back and do it again.
Exactly, yeah. I had a good cry over that one, though. Oh,
did you really?
Well, I really thought... So when I had that light bulb moment that the way I'm going to get rid of the discomfort of my sport and the miscarriage, because I'd had the miscarriages already at that point, and was to get into medicine. So when I failed the first time, I'm like, you've got to be kidding. Like, come on, man. Like, surely this was my light bulb moment of clarity of what I'm going to do with the rest of my life.
Yeah.
So it actually took a hell of a lot of balls, to be honest, the following year to sit it again, because all I was really doing was reaffirming I was probably stupid enough not to get into medicine, wasn't it? If you fail your second time or a third time, you're like, great. But there was a lot of courage in that. That was probably the most courageous moment of my life, was sitting that entrance exam a second time, because I had this great excuse. I had this whole excuse to the world that I always wanted to be a doctor, but, I went and I did sport for 20 years, and so I'm just too old, and, I'm not... too hard basket. Because I hadn't told anyone I was sitting the exam. Did it in secret. So
at least
I could have kept that.
You could have kept it to yourself and no one would have known that you failed.
Which is very unusual for Jana, isn't it? Because my personality is normally blurt everything out to the world. But
So you've had your success in your sporting career. You're now a doctor.
Yep.
Some of the things that I wanted to talk about specifically, you've already answered, and it would seem that maybe, and I don't want to downplay, the heartache and the pain and all the things you've had in your life, but it would seem that I wanted to talk about how you dealt with it, how you got through it. Is there still, but you've sort of answered. You've had a medical degree and it's fulfilled you and you're happy. Well,
no, do you know what though? I'm also a big advocate for reliving some of those experiences because I look at them differently from others. So I think a lot of people look at their heartache and their negativities as almost reminders of not to do those things again because they will hurt and they will block you. So almost as a learning of let's not take that fear factor again and experience pain. Whereas I actually do the opposite. When I need a kick in the balls to keep going and go harder, I actually re-examine some of the things that I went through that were really hard and awful. And they do 2 things. Firstly, it shows, well, I survived them. So therefore I'm showing my strength and I use it as a positive to prove that things that you're capable of doing things. It's your capacity. But I also look at it and think, well, that pain can be used in a negative way, or it can actually be your desire and your drive to actually push into something positive. A bit like the love-hate relationship. Your body doesn't really know the difference. It just needs passion.
Yeah.
And so I use those disappointments regularly. And I think it's really important that people don't block away and push that disappointment away because it defines who you are. And this little lovely, I've met her recently, little Pakistani lady. She was an 86-year-old doctor, so she was an immigrant to Australia. And I did this big speech to her about failure and whatever, like to all of the women in the room, but she was just sort of sitting there in the corner listening. And she came up to me and goes, I love your speech, but I'm going to give you a new way to look at failure. Fail, the word, is first attempt in learning. Use it for all your talks. And I have used it bread and butter for every day because it's exactly that, isn't it? Your failures and your heartaches are just a way to learn about who you are and learn about the fact that you've survived good things and you've got capacity to do a lot more than you think you have.
What's your greatest failure?
My marriages, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So definitely my relationships have been you can't be as driven and focused as I am and make a normal style relationship work well. I think I don't regret it, but I was head over heels in love with my first husband. I was head over heels in love with my first boyfriend, and my career, I lost my first partner for my career. I actually made an executive decision to choose sport over my relationship. So I was asked by my coach to do that. And I regret that quite a lot. But again, I don't see regrets as a negative. I see them as a learning. So you look at that situation and say, from that event, this consequence happened. So I need to learn that those actions have consequences, that those actions mean something. They don't just happen and flippantly, dissolve overnight. And I think it's a really important thing to have.
I know there's a couple of things that are off limits. Today. I'm not going to go there.
No, I don't mind.
Have you
learnt
your lessons?
Look, I think my relationship with my current husband is very different now. We are purely friends, and I think that's a very different style of relationship. And he is also an incredibly private man. So you're right. I don't talk about our marriage very much because that's a request from him. So, which is a bit unusual, isn't it? Because most guys, I want to marry someone famous and be in the media with them and the press. No, he doesn't feature in any media.
It's like, Jana,
very rarely.
Keep your mouth closed about me.
Do not talk about me. It is not your life. I'm like, no problem. But I have to respect that.
Yeah.
And so, but it is unconventional because I think, it sounds like you and your wife love each other and you have that real space, whereas we are just mates.
Maybe you've learnt your lesson though.
Well, I think I don't want to get heartbroken again, to be honest.
If that makes you happy.
So, yeah, and we both want children. We both want to support each other's career goals and life. And but it's very unconventional because, we don't live together. So we live only on the weekends together and things like that. But it works for us. And you can hear a little human crying in the background up there.
Do you want to go?
I'll just tell.
So we touched on then what your greatest failures were. And I think as people, and especially when we learn to understand ourselves and what our drivers are and recognise our weaknesses and all that, you do learn from them. What's your greatest success?
My compassion, I think.
Yeah.
Just because I give everybody a second chance, and I try really hard to always see the positives in situations for others as well. So when things don't go to plan and whatnot, I think I'm very good in helping others get the best out of themselves. So
greatest success, greatest failure. I guess a couple of other things that I want to touch on before we lead into the whole using your voice and leveraging your reputation and advocacy things and stuff like that is a couple of the cool things that have come when I say post-career, I mean you're in your prime career right now as a doctor, but post-sport. I
like that. You're in your prime career now. I like that.
SAS, things like that. Yeah. It's led to you having some super cool opportunities.
Yeah, exactly.
And probably opportunities that, when I turned up today and before we touched on or spoken about, I would never have thought that. But so here's someone that's gone through an extreme training regime and ritual for their whole, and you're like, it was one of the hardest things you've done.
Really hard.
It's amazing with TV, isn't it? You would think that it was.
They definitely downplayed it. When I watched it back, they beasted us every night. So that's where they get you up in the middle of the night and throw you down on the parade square and just thumped you physically, and they cut most of that out. So I remember watching and thinking, gosh, I look so tired, but I don't look like I've actually done anything. So it's like.
And is that just to test your mental toughness?
Yeah, absolutely. They were there to try. They were really trying to break you. Yeah. So, and I think that's why I liked the show. And I'm similar to probably you get lots of opportunities to do for different shows and ideas and things you want to do, and Dancing with the Stars, all different options. But I'd never said yes to any of them. So this was the first one I'd ever said yes to. And one of the reasons was that it was about you voting yourself off. In other words, it was you give up when you can't take it anymore. It's nothing to do with
personal
you're not competing. It's right. You're not competing. You and I are not competing against each other. The public's not voting you on and off. It's all about you and whether you got what it takes or not. So
this crazy driven Jana inside you.
Yeah, so it was like the perfect...
Kicks back in again to push yourself and see where you can take it. That's
right, because I was so out of shape. I was a little bit devastated. I remember for day one when I was going into the program thinking, God, if they make me run, which happens, I'm sure, but if you make me run 5Ks up a block of stairs and I have to carry a bag, I'm going to piss myself or something on television, and thinking about how that would look. And I really had that long conversation about, because it actually happened on the television show. So it was just one of those things where I'm going to let myself down, and why am I doing this? And then the little voice goes, well, why not?
Yeah.
What's the worst thing that could happen out of it? Look like a bit of an idiot. Well, you've done that before, so yes.
So I wasn't going to ask if you pissed your pants on national television, but are we going to see?
Know that?
Are we going to see you on Dancing with the Stars?
Yeah,
Maybe that's a more appropriate question.
Yeah, more appropriate question. No, because it's not an inappropriate question. And depending on who your listeners are, it was a massive conversation that came out of the show that I did, because I actually acknowledged incontinence in the postpartum space, so post having babies and whatnot, and how that's a really hard time for your pelvic floor. And so I very openly talked about it. And for the simple fact that I see patients every day who have incontinence and who are so deeply ashamed by that very unfortunately normal, but not, no, sorry, I shouldn't say normal, very common but easily treatable condition.
Yeah.
And I just wanted women to talk about it, But it was so funny because more men wrote to me saying, oh, my wife is finally talking to me about it. I just really didn't understand why she didn't want to have sex with me and why she just didn't love her body anymore. And it actually turns out it was because she's had all this incontinence, and now that she's going and seeing a physio, that's
opened up a taboo.
Yeah, opened up this really taboo conversation.
Yeah.
So yet again, it's a positive. So out of my own discomfort can make someone else feel better about themselves, and that's now my goal is to be able to be open in spaces that really need to be explored.
I'm not going to ask you to name and shame because it's just never going to happen. So I'm not going to ask who was the worst on SAS. Who surprised you
team
the
were great.
Who surprised you the most?
Yeah, on I've watched other episodes, other series, and the cast, I think they wanted there to be animosity and group, as they do with TV. Everyone got along. Like we were really great. It was all great.
Who surprised you the most?
Who surprised me the most?
In terms of ability and determination.
Mark Philippoussis has the most stamina I've ever met out of anyone, because if you actually watch him, sorry Mark, because I'm sure you'll probably listen to this, he'd be a great one for you to do actually, but he failed everything. Like he failed the helicopter where you had to actually swing yourself out and monkey bar under the heli. He failed that. He fell off the tightrope. He didn't shoot the right person. Like he failed everything. He just absolutely flat out refused to stop. So he got right to the end, and he hadn't pretty much passed anything except the things that he and I did a couple of things together. He just has such an enormous capacity to work and not be influenced or hurt by the things he didn't do well, which was such a great message, because there were other people who literally would fail a task. We all fail tasks, but fail a task and then ruminate on it. And then they go back and be like, oh, I'm so disappointed with myself. I can't believe I did that. And the poo's like, who cares? It doesn't matter if you pass it. You're not here to pass things. You're here to stay. So he was
although he failed at everything, he didn't fail on giving up on himself.
Never gave up on himself. Never, ever, ever threw the towel in.
Cool quality to have.
Yeah. So he was my most impressive. Sam Burgess was impressive too, but he was just a beast. He passed everything and he was just amazing.
Yeah.
But he impressed me on a personal level, because obviously media, we all read sort of stories and his background and whatnot. But he's obviously a huge age gap, but I'd let him marry my daughter. He's that good a bloke. And he also really acknowledges his weaknesses and his failures in the past. And I just found that a really humbling experience to meet him.
How you rate people? Like, I would let them marry my daughter, because I'd be interested to find out in future interviews or podcasts if you ever go, that Andrew Purdie, he will never marry one of my daughters.
That's what you do, don't you?
So opportunities come, you've taken it. Yeah. I love it.
Yeah,
and
great.
I guess now for the bit that, and I've got to say that before I move on to your advocacy stuff, because obviously the Hidden Philanthropist and I love what you do. For me, the most impressive thing you've done is a mother of 6 kids and be able to do the other things that what other people may deem to be success. To be a mother of 6 kids and do such an incredible job at it is the most impressive thing for me that I think you've ever done.
Oh, that's kind. But remember, I flail at that regularly too.
No, you don't. Look at your beautiful kids. It just came down and how happy they are to see mum. And
I do have very loving and I give a lot of time to them. But I can tell you the mother guilt rages on a daily basis, and I'm constantly having to try and balance my career and the expectations of my children and the expectations of myself on me. The sacrifices that I've made have been real, and I've had to really reevaluate who I am as a person, because my natural instinct as an athlete does not fit with motherhood. And so we always say you don't want to change a person. I have had to change for my children.
I've got to say I can't relate to you on the athletic level, because I've never been an athlete, but I would say
as a driven, successful man, though,
on a corporate level, the greatest sacrifice that one makes is parenting. That's correct. And I did a Facebook post, which I actually did one of my own Facebook posts. I did a Facebook post a while ago about when I was on the interview for CEO Magazine and a couple of other things, and just a bit of recognition. And I'm like, do you know what? Having little bits of recognition is so great, because people simply don't see the sacrifice that goes on behind closed doors to make shit happen. And I'm like, do you know what? The sacrifice that I give up as a father and the time that I don't have with my kids
is huge. Eats your way
away. It's so like hard. It is a killer, and
we have to acknowledge that
100%.
Because so many people don't, and they try to explore that or make it look like it's all perfect and all works really well. But
talking about my kids gave me goosebumps.
Oh, that's lovely.
So I guess now, today, Jana, you've become a doctor. You're successful in your own right, but you also use your voice in an incredibly powerful way. And that's through your advocacy work and these conversations that you're making people have and topics and issues that you're bringing to the surface, and you're doing it with a proud and loud voice. And because a lot of these topics, I mean, there's topics out there that everyone's happy to talk about and advocate for, but be an advocacy for, but you're talking about some really uncomfortable
unattractive
topics, but you're making it comfortable.
That's my goal.
Yeah, right. Talk to me about it.
So after being through, I guess, some of the ups and downs of the media and recognising that there are lots of ways to perceive yourself, I got to a point where I really just believed I am enough. That I'm good in the shoes that I'm in, but what I can do is be a real voice for women's health issues, for mental health issues, for lots of advocacy spaces where we need to bring conversation or they're never going to improve. And, you know, the first few times I sort of put my toe in the water a little bit, for example, with Australian Cervical Cancer Foundation, I started doing a lot of their TV advocacy work because, let's be honest, we know that cervical cancer is a HPV infection, which is a sexually transmitted infection. So it was really hard for that foundation to get any publicity and any conversations because a lot of people didn't want to stand up and say, well, I have cervical cancer and I got it because of obviously a sexually transmitted infection, which we know is like the common cold of the vagina. 90% of people have it. But the point is it's still a difficult conversation to have. And so I sort of put my foot in the water and realised it was actually really well received and not seen in a negative way at all. And then obviously the incontinence conversations and the miscarriage conversations and the general vaginal health conversations sort of kept happening. And then I realised I actually felt very comfortable in my own discomfort because I could see so openly how it made other people feel. And that is such a rewarding space for me to be in. Like, you know, I don't give a shit, to be honest, what people think about me anymore. I used to, very much. Don't get me wrong, I'm still sensitive. I still get that crush if I hear something negative. But I recognise that is my weakness. My weakness is actually listening to that stuff and not and having to comprehend that it's not my failings. It's just conversation. And in fact, that means you're doing the right thing because you're actually getting out there and really talking
100%.
about that space. And it's funny because the thing we just talked about was the whole motherhood guilt thing. And I went to an event recently, was talking about new mums and that, you know, the postpartum depression and how real that is. And I remember getting up on the stage and I actually said, you know, I so vividly remember wanting this baby so much. I'd been through multiple miscarriages and there she was lying in my arms and she was screaming her head off and all I wanted to do was give her back. So acknowledging that, and someone in the back of the room went and rolled her eyes like, I cannot believe she just said that. And I'm like, no, mate. Everyone in this room feels like that with a newborn baby. All of us struggle and really, really wonder and second guess what we did. It's just that I'm going to acknowledge it so that other people realise that feeling in them is normal and that you will get through it and that you will love that baby on that first birthday and you will build that bond and you will get through those moments. But again, 3 days ago, I was driving home from the Gold Coast with 12 hours of 6 screaming kids in the car. Everybody was squawking in the back and all I wanted to do was get out of the car and close the doors. That's real life. Okay, the pretty holiday photos I post on Instagram, that's not real.
Sounds like my plane ride the other day.
Yes.
Do you remember? Oh my God, we'll talk about that after this. So
but that's what you have to. We have to acknowledge the realness and, like, you know, the whole. I regularly post about my postpartum body as well. Like very real photos. I very rarely wear makeup on Instagram and stuff because I want people to see that you can be very successful, but there is a consequence. I haven't been able to train. I haven't been able to do exercise. There is a real sacrifice on me to make sure my family and my career are working, which means the last time I did real exercise was 2 years ago, properly.
But being a great mother,
own that,
and dedicating yourself to that and the sacrifices, like, isn't that real success?
100%, yes.
Isn't it this shift that we see in what success is? Because success could be you having won a gold medal, but like for other people and for me interviewing, like success for me is a sacrifice that you make, we make, people make. To be good parents, good friends, good husbands, good sons, good. Yeah, it's really important. So maybe some of this media bashing and desensitization has actually enabled you to put 100%. Your hand up now and say, I'll talk about vaginas. I'll talk about all these things that people feel really uncomfortable talking about.
100%,
and you don't care.
Yes.
You're like,
that is right.
I'm here to be the voice.
And my entire life's been like that. If I had have won the Olympic Games, I wouldn't be a doctor. If I hadn't have gone through the negative media stuff, I definitely wouldn't have had the courage to have the voice to speak in such an uncomfortable space now. If I hadn't have had the miscarriages, I probably wouldn't have 6 children. And I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing now, which is the uterine. I don't even know if we haven't even talked about this, but I'm doing a PhD as well at the moment in uterine transplant. So we actually I'm involved in one of the junior doctors in the uterine transplant team in Australia, and we just announced a couple of days ago that she's pregnant post her first uterine transplant in February. First time it's ever been done in Australia.
Congratulations.
But I wouldn't have even been a part of that. if I had have won the Olympics, and I wouldn't have even been interested in the infertility space if I hadn't have gone through it myself. So, and funnily enough, one of the first ever women to have a transplant in the world had cervical cancer, and that was the very first time I ever got involved in was looking at what it would feel like had I had to have had a hysterectomy when I had the cervical cancer scare a few years ago, because there was a very real chance that was going to happen. And so all those things all play into where you are now.
Sliding door moments.
But they all ultimately, as long as your eyes are open to opportunities, they ultimately become your path.
And I guess to finish up something you just said, like we hadn't talked about that yet, and what we haven't talked about is future, Jana. What does the future look like for you?
Oh, you know what though? The future has to be a better balance than it has been in the past 25 years. And so I'm actively working on trying to find ways to keep my family happy, especially as they're getting older. And we always say that the babies are the hardest, but no, as your kids need you to take them to sports, like my mum did, and my son's in his HSC senior year next year, I need to be more present. And so my number one goal in the next 2 to 3 years is finding that happy medium and that balance, and not pushing as hard for success.
You know that's going to be one of your greatest challenges, don't you?
Oh, absolutely.
Do you know what?
I honour that.
On behalf of all the people that you've helped, and on behalf of all the causes you support, and most importantly, congratulations on all your successes, because I think you're amazing.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you for being on my podcast.
Absolute pleasure.
Thank you.